Hi, I am Parker, and I will be talking and debating about soybean aphids. Their scientific name is Aphis glycines. The main issue with soybean aphids is how quickly they can multiply. They cause major damage to the crops and are a huge pest in the agricultural world. They are a native of Asia and are known as the most serious pest and threat to soybeans.
Hi, my name is Molly, and the species I will be defending is the Melanophis saccharine, also known as the sugarcane aphid. This is an enroaching species, so they multiply quickly and feed on plants, causing mass destruction. Sugarcane aphids are thought to have originated from Africa and the Middle East, but since then they have widely spread to other areas of the country. Our debate topic is what causes greater damage or losses in agriculture?
Aphis glycines, otherwise known as the soybean aphid, soybean aphids are known to suck sap out of different parts of the plant and can cause major harm to crops. These insects are normally a light green to pale yellow color. They are also very small in size. They can either be winged or wingless, depending on certain circumstances, and have two black tailpipes attached to the back of their abdomen. Throughout the lifetime of a soybean aphid, they travel to two different kinds of plants. They start out on a plant that can withstand a cold winter called buckhorn. They can lay eggs on these winter enduring plants because their eggs are equipped to survive under cold circumstances. Their life cycle is called heteroecious because when the spring comes, they alternate hosts. When the eggs hatch on the buckhorn, they will have 2 to 3 generations start with sexual reproduction before they transfer host. The females will then move to the soybean plants in the summer. This life cycle repeats over and over again. When the females get to the soybean, they cause so much damage because they produce so quickly. This is because all of the offspring are females. The way that they reproduce is that the offspring are already born pregnant. With that said, this is what causes such a rapid aphid overtake. The impact of soybean aphids starts with the insects sucking the sap out of the soybean plant. This causes the plant to wilt and can ultimately lead to it dying. They first start out with the leaves. After the plants start to grow and the aphid population flowers, stems, and pods. With the large amount of soybean aphids they can gather so quickly, it is a major threat to the crops. Low aphid populations are not much of a concern, but it is the growing population that is a problem. When big populations of soybean aphids form, they can reduce soybean plant production by 40%. They can also spread diseases and can cause moldy substances produced from the sugar they secrete.
Melanophis saccharine, or the sugarcane aphid, is a small pest that is known for destroying crops like sugarcane and more specifically sorghum. These insects can either be winged or wingless. The aphids that have wings are typically developed as a result of stress if either the colony becomes too crowded or the quality of food begins to decrease. So, some adults can grow wings in order to fly to other areas. Their mouths are used for penetrating plants and sucking sap, which ultimately affects plant growth. All sugarcane aphids are females who can reproduce without mating, and they can give birth to about 1 to 3 offspring every day. Nymph aphids can mature into adults in 5 days and then begin to reproduce. The lifespan of adults is only about 4 weeks long. However, due to their quick reproduction, it does not make much of a difference. Sugarcane aphids tend to create colonies and feed on the lower side of leaves. It is easy to spot these colonies if you look for shiny honeydew on the tops and bottoms of leaves. The feeding of the sugarcane aphid causes leaves to turn brown until the leaf tissue eventually dies, and it can also cause a stunt in plant growth. Sugarcane aphid infestations can cause a production of honeydew which is very sticky and can make it difficult to separate the grain from the plants. Honeydew can clog machinery when it is time to harvest due to its sticky texture. Overall, this leads to an abundant amount of grain loss, economical damage, and makes it very difficult for farmers to harvest their crops. Not all of these pests look the same. Their body color can be either gray, tan, or even yellow. They also have black marks on their legs and antennae, as well as black cornicles. These insects have been a very big problem in the southern United States and even Mexico. Many efforts have been made to try to reduce the infestations of sugarcane aphids and preserve crops.
When comparing the information between soybean aphids and sugarcane aphids, there are many of the same characteristics. They cause damage to crops in the same way and have a similar body structure. However, there are some differences in the way that they reproduce. Soybean aphids produce at a faster rate than sugarcane aphids do. Soybean aphids can produce 3 to 8 offspring per day, while sugarcane aphids only produce 1 to 3 offspring per day. With how fast the soybean aphids reproduce, they can double or triple their population within 2 to 3 days. With this said, soybean aphids can spread and produce faster than sugarcane aphids, causing a larger population, ultimately causing a greater environmental impact.
There are definitely many similarities between the soybean aphid and the sugarcane aphid. They both feed on plants the same way and cause the same deadly effect on these plants. I do agree that the soybean aphid's high reproduction rate can cause a lot of damage. However, I do not think that just 3 more soybean aphids causes greater damage to the crops than the similar speedy reproduction of the sugarcane aphid, especially when the colonies are already so large. Sugarcane aphids are also very damaging because they can spread very rapidly to far distances. They were found for the first time feeding on sorghum in North America in 2013, but 2 years later, they had rapidly spread across many areas of Mexico and the United States. Then, by 2015, they were present in Puerto Rico and every state that produces sorghum in the South from Texas to Florida, then reaching from Kansas to North Carolina. They travel very quickly, and one of their main sources of travel is through the wind. So not only do they reproduce quickly, but they also travel far distances.
I do agree that both types of aphids reproduce at a high rate and that the difference in the reproduction rate may not be that significant. Soybean and sugarcane aphids are both very invasive species, and their population grows in very high numbers. However, with this said, soybean aphids also spread fast, just like sugarcane aphids do. They first started spreading in North America in July of 2000. This was 13 years before the discovery of sugarcane aphids. They can now be found throughout some parts of Canada and northeastern United States. Soybean aphids became so invasive that they had to come up with a way to control these pests. In order to stop the desecration of soybean aphids, researchers have come up with plant options that are aphid-resistant varieties. The soybean aphid is the only aphid known to invade soybean fields. When they invade these fields, they can produce diseases that spread to the plants, causing a major loss in the crop.
You have definitely made a convincing argument that soybean aphids are very damaging to agriculture, and more specifically, soybean plants. I do believe that it is easier to identify the similarities between both the soybean aphid and the sugarcane aphid than identifying their differences when it comes to damaging crops. The main difference between these two aphids is that they feed on different plants, but they really are not very different from each other. However, sugarcane aphids also cause mold growth on plants, and this can often spread, preventing light absorption for photosynthesis. Since you stated that soybean aphids were discovered before sugarcane aphids were, this means that scientists have had more time to identify a treatment for preventing soybean aphid infestations. Therefore, since sugarcane aphids are more recently discovered, it can cause them to be even more damaging since less research has been done. Scientists have been working on many techniques to control invasive pests like sugarcane aphids in order to preserve crops like sugarcane, Johnson grass, shattercane, and sorghum.
Soybean aphids have been causing damage to crops for over 20 years now. Over these years, scientists have tried to come up with an anti-aphid soybean plant to repel soybean aphids away from the crop. During their research, they have observed that a soybean plant can handle about 400 to 500 aphids before the crop starts yielding. With the discovery of the amount that a plant can handle, there has also been research done with the use of an insecticide. There has been success with an insecticide that has shown to be very effective when used at the correct time. Even though there has been a creation of a treatment for soybean aphids, there is a natural element that controls the aphid population. Since soybean aphids are so small and slow-moving, they are very susceptible to predators. This ultimately contributes to a massive control over the overtaking population. It is important that researchers obtain the information on soybean aphids because they are such a threat to the soybean crop. If we did not know a significant amount about how they live and what they do, then the treatments that were introduced would not have been possible. It is important that we keep learning more in order to keep the soybean aphid population under control.
Since sugarcane aphids have created an abundance of agricultural problems that have led to economic loss, scientists have been using them to research effective ways to prevent further damage. Scientists have been trying to identify and characterize systems of insect resistance in order to understand more about plant-insect interactions. By doing this, they can develop strategies to defend plants like sorghum from the invasive sugarcane aphid. Many experiments have been conducted to identify the reactions of plants when infested with sugarcane aphids. However, the molecular systems that create resistance to sugarcane aphids in plants are still trying to be identified. This species is very important to study because they can help scientists determine the differences of how plants responded to sugarcane aphids and also how the aphids respond to the plants. Insecticides have also been helpful when exterminating sugarcane aphids, but insecticides require full coverage of the entire plant. It is often difficult for plants to achieve full coverage, which doesn't make insecticides a very beneficial way of controlling infestations. A significant treatment for preventing further agricultural damage from sugarcane aphids has still not been successful. Therefore, sugarcane aphids will continue to be one of the most damaging invasive species until more and more research is performed.